morning, everybody. My name is Nicole Medor. I've met a lot of you and introduced myself a few times here. I'm an early childhood specialist at the Maine Department of Education. My colleague, Marcy Whitcomb, is on as well. She's our early childhood monitor. And we're partnering with Janice Kaiser, who will introduce herself in just a moment, from the American Institute for Research. And she's going to lead us today through a discussion around minding the gap in pre-K and K. So welcome, Janice.
You bet. Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, everybody. I see some familiar names and familiar faces. So welcome. I'm glad that you're here. I am Janice Kaiser. I'm in Austin, Texas, where I've spent most of my entire life. I was an early childhood teacher, a director of schools. I've done lots of training and coordination and collaboration with school districts around the Central Texas area, in particular to help them broker partnerships between Head Start, child care, and public schools, and really to foster those relationships to the betterment of all of those young learners and their teachers. I now currently work for American Institutes for Research as a facilitator, kind of in a similar role, working with state education agencies and local education agencies around early childhood issues. So I'm glad to be here with you this morning. Thanks for taking the time. We're going to be talking about your back to school planning, things that you're mulling over in your head. How do we do this? Well, we're calling this minding the gap for a number of reasons. Typically we do talk about a bit of a gap between the end of the last school year, the beginning of a new school year, and a little bit of that uncertainty about what knowledge and skills did students retain over that period of time, versus what they may have lost, or what does that exactly look like. And we know this is certainly a unique and different year for us coming up, school year. So we'll dig deeper into some of the planning and things that we can do to try to better prepare and plan as we go. And then there are a couple of places where I would really like to invite you all to participate, either by unmuting your line and joining in verbally that way, or in the chat box. And then we'll close our session today by talking about some next steps, things that you can be thinking about, planning for, and so on. We will make the slide deck available at the end. I believe Marcy and Nicole will send it out along with the recording, the link of the recording, should there be anyone else that wants to watch who couldn't be here. So before we go any further, take just a minute and pick the emoji that best describes your current feeling about the new school year. So this would be, you would go A and then your number, or A through H rather, and the number. And if you feel comfortable, please share your coordinates in the chat box. And if you see someone else with the same emoji and you feel comfortable enough to identify a connection with that person and their name, please do that. And I will do the same. Let's see. Yeah, we've got a good range, don't we? Why are we feeling this way? What do you all think? We're ranging from okay to not so sure. COVID, yeah, for sure. Anything else?
It's a lot of very new and different experiences that are possible.
Yeah. And I'm finding as I visit with my colleagues at state education agencies and at school districts that the feelings just vary from day to day, even sometimes very high highs and excitement that is typical for a new school year. And then other times there's just such great confusion. And I see in the chat box mixed feelings, things changing on the daily. Yeah, lots of that sort of stuff. And just we're not really sure what to expect, right? Thank you for participating in that. I think it helps for us to just take a minute and sort of think about where we are. So I set some goals for us today. We're going to explore some strategies to make the return to school a little bit more manageable and meaningful, I hope, in terms of the way that you think about planning for this large gap in time since students were actually together in the same place, if that happens to be what happens. We want to understand more clearly how to identify what the non-negotiables for pre-K and kindergarten classrooms are, meaning what are the things that we need to really make sure we plan for and we're prepared to teach, because there are a lot of other things that we as early childhood educators love to bring into our classrooms that are enriching, important, and stimulating, and absolutely useful, but are not necessarily non-negotiables. So there's a bit of a difference there, and we'll talk through that. And then I want to spend probably the bulk of our time really examining some strategies prior to learning, and having students back with us, and then what happens immediately as they are beginning the school year. What does that look like for our planning purposes for them? How do we think about using assessment data for those purposes, and moving into the new school year as steady as we can. I'm very cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to make some kind of forward momentum that is normal, to the extent we can do that. And then how do we adjust learning plans to meet all learners? Because we can go in with some really great planning and really good ideas and then discover that we have just these wide ranges of student skills and abilities and needs. And I know I'm preaching to the choir on that. You guys are very familiar with this. All right, so let's start here. We know how we're feeling from our emoji exercise a moment ago, but what are your big concerns, like the really big ticket concerns that you're coming into this school year, thinking about, worrying about, as they relate to teaching students, like the delivery of content, to be very specific, not the are we going back or are we not, but actually connecting with students.
I'll start.
Please. Hi, Erin.
The environment changing in the classroom, the expected curriculum that we're supposed to be teaching. It's all hands-on in pre-K, and now it seems like all students will be at desks. They'll have individual bags of what to play with. Just that new environment in pre-K is my big concern. What it will look like for a full day pre-K program with COVID.
Right.
If it's a hybrid option or if it's in person 5 days a week.
Yep, I hear you. Thank you. Anyone else want to share on screen?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm kind of feeling the same way that Erin's feeling, because I'm a pre-K teacher, and wondering what it's going to look like for center choice time, trying to keep them separated, and having, social emotional is so huge for pre-K, and just the spaces have to be apart from each other, and there's no rugs in the classroom, and so no circle time, no gathering. It's just really going to look different, and trying to find ways to make it work.
Right. Are you all, do you know yet, and maybe you do not, how you're going back? Are you going back in person, everyone? or is it a hybrid model, anything like that, or are you splitting the group up so you have fewer students on given days, anything like that that you're aware of yet?
As of now, for my school, we are going back full time, and it depends on the red, green, yellow zone. But right now, I think we're in a yellow zone, so we're all going back, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it can change day to day depending on COVID.
Yeah, which we're really seeing here in Texas right now. A great deal of uncertainty, as I'm sure you've probably seen on the news. So as you think about those concerns, how do you think children are feeling? If you're feeling this way and you have these concerns, where do you think they are in all of this? I don't want to venture a guess, and it is a guess until we see them.
I'm worried about children having a little bit of anxiety about going back to school because there's been so much talk about it, and then feeling like they can't get close to their friends. I just don't want that whole, but I think if we go in it as a, strength-based and positive attitude as a teacher, and showing the, excitement of going back to school and just, modeling best practice is going to have to be the best way we do it, I guess.
Right. Vicki, I'm trying to catch your question over here. How do we teach in person simultaneously with providing lessons for families choosing remote learning at home and half classes at home hybrid? That's a lot of extra planning and prep. That is the question of the century, I think, right now. I don't know, because what I'm hearing, until we see it and we can study it and we can see what's really working, what I'm hearing most often is that schools are, if they're giving parents choice to either come in on campus or stay home, they're providing two different instructors, or there is a lead teacher and a paraprofessional or educational aide that work in tandem, and they will rotate. One will be in the classroom for certain parts of the day, the other might be doing some online components, and then they might switch so that both groups of students have the benefit of working with both educators. But we don't know yet, at least in my area, what that's going to look like. So this is new territory for sure. And one thing I feel pretty confident guaranteeing is there will be a lot of studies coming out after this period of time to really do a look back over what did we do, what did we try, what worked, what wasn't so successful for various grades, and so on. So there's a lot to be learned, and I feel like we're on the cusp of really understanding a whole other part of teaching and learning that has not been a part of the pre-K through grade 12 school system in the past, right? We've had distance learning in higher ed, and I've taught in that environment for the last 20 years. So we're very familiar when it became online for college level students, but very different here for us. So this is a Wordle that some colleagues of mine put together as they were talking with teachers. Does this sort of sum up some of your concerns and fears and thoughts that roll around in your head at night? Are these the words that you keep hearing and thinking about? Yeah, with students in the middle, of very front and center, very much our concern, very much our goal to do what's best for them, right? And this is why we teach to begin with, to do what's best and right for our students. All right, so minding the gap. If you've ever traveled in England, you know that as you get on and off of their tram systems and their train systems, that there is an announcement as you board and deboard that says mind the gap. So meaning don't step in the space between the rails and the sidewalk. mind the gap. And that's really what we're trying to do here. And it's really natural for teachers to think about students before the start of a school year and wonder, about that summer learning loss and the knowledge and skills that they attained in the last school year. How are they doing? Were those solid and really well embedded in their abilities? This year, though, students left school in mid-March, so we're looking at a very long period of time where students have been away from their peers, their teachers, the routine of school. And though many parents have tried to work with their students and we have tried to work with them remotely, it has been a very different learning environment. And for some, it was successful in the spring. There were some good connections that were made, and parents were able to maintain and work with their students while they're trying to keep everything afloat with their jobs and their home responsibilities and so on. And then it's not been so successful for other students for a variety of reasons, whether those were technology issues, parents having time to really work with their kids and so on. So it is pretty uncertain. And I'm sure you know this better than anybody, right? You're living it, you're planning for it. So as we talk about this idea of minding the gap, there are these guiding questions that we need to keep in the forefront of our planning. And they're pretty straightforward, I think, but we're going to break them down as we go. So we need to know, what do you want students to know and be able to do? How will you know when they've learned it? How will you get them there? How will you respond when some students do not learn what you want them to learn or need them to learn? And how will you extend the learning for students who are already proficient in the skills or the knowledge that you're trying to teach? And this year, probably more than ever, these guiding questions are very important because of the added stress, the added worry, the uncertainty, all of the things that are swirling around in our heads as we think about this new school year and we engage in professional development and we plan for the unknown. The more grounded we can stay in our understanding of what we're trying to accomplish versus what's out of our control right now, the better success we'll have. We'll be on more sure ground. Does that make sense? There we go. And to do this, we've created sort of a roadmap, and we're going to use, you'll see this particular slide show up at various points throughout our discussion today. Our roadmap is pretty straightforward, I think, and you've seen this before, I'm sure, in different ways. Again, I'm stressing the importance of us just staying very focused as best we can to do only what we can do right in front of us. So we're going to clarify our non-negotiables. These are the things that we need to make sure happen. We're going to identify prior learning needs and understand where students should be at the beginning of the school year and where we want them to go. We're going to talk about identifying resources for ourselves and for our students, create some pre-assessment expectations, and then conduct and analyze those pre-assessments to learn what we can learn about our students' knowledge and skills, where they are today, or when we get them in a few weeks, and create shared and individual learning experiences that match our resources that we have to work with this school year, our limitations, those types of things. Again, as you've already pointed out, it's going to look really different when we come back, and there won't be the circle times and the small group play around the classroom and center time, things like that. It will be a different world for them and us. He who has a why can endure any how. So really, really honing in on, why am I doing this? If I understand clearly what my path is and what my roadmap is, I can stay pretty straight and narrow on that path. For me as a teacher, and even in my work with our research projects, when we start spiraling around the what ifs, that's when we get off our path and we start thinking of all these other alternative scenarios. Well, what if this happens? Well, what if that happens and this happens? But when I center again and I start thinking about, okay, why did I set out to do this lesson in the first place? Then I can begin to really rationalize, well, if these other things happen, I will deal with them. But until those things happen, I will stay the course. And this is hard right now. It's really hard. It's hard all the time, frankly. I think you know that too, because we always have these external things swirling around us and other expectations, right? So we'll talk a whole lot about the why. Why are we doing this? It's important for you to identify your whys. What do we do? Like, what literally do we do as a classroom teacher? How do we do it? For whom do we do it? And why do we do it? What value are we bringing to students' lives, to families? I'm curious to know from you all, and feel free to unmute your line if you would like. How are you feeling about being centered and being focused on your why and your goals and expectations for children's learning? How is that going? Or how do you feel about it at this point? Anybody want to share? Do you feel like you can focus and stay the course?
Hi, this is Mary Beth.
Hi, Mary Beth.
I feel really strongly that pre-K has a lot of, how would I say it? Qualitative more than quantifiable measures that children aren't offered in maybe older grades as much. I guess what I'm saying is I feel like pre-K is so much about being apart from a trusted family member, learning to trust another adult, being part of a small group, social emotional skills, self-help skills, taking care of things. So I feel really strongly that online learning for pre-K is not appropriate. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from families that are feeling that way from last year. They loved what we did, but so I guess I'm feeling, that's the one place I feel anxious. I don't worry about so much letters, numerals, concepts as much. And I feel concerned about that. And I've put some notes in the chat. I just feel really concerned about folks saying no circle time, no center time. And I keep touting the Maine Academy pediatrics, the main chapter, and the pediatricians that spoke to us through the union webinar last night. And it was so reassuring what they talked about and how we could do schooling. And I think that's really important to share with our administrators. I'm in a building, I have a great setup. We're in a building separate from the main school, small number of kids, 2 bathrooms, 4 sinks, access to a great outdoor space, which we're trying to develop more into an outdoor classroom. So I'm feeling really hopeful about that. But if I have to do a lot of remote, my big concern is that social emotional, being part of a group is just not going to happen.
Yeah, I hear you. Your concern is echoed all around. I think that more than anything, I think pre-K and kindergarten, early childhood teachers in general are going to be blazing completely new trails. and forming relationships with families and caregivers in such different ways, as we have been doing since March, but really trying to think outside the box and really understand our whys and our hows, and helping parents and other people to fill in some of the gaps as well. Because in the current situation and what we think we're going to be dealing with for a little while at least, it's not going to look like a traditional early childhood classroom, even if we move outdoors and even if we have fewer children in a group, and we social distance and things like that. There's still going to be some connection that's lost. And so I think it requires us now to focus on those family relationships and extending the learning outside of the classroom much more, exponentially much more than we really have maybe in the past. There's always been an emphasis on strong family and school relationships. Don't misunderstand that. But I think it's just bigger, more important, and more front and center, so that hopefully students can get a little bit of those social and emotional supports, not only from school and from us, from their teachers, but from those around them, if they've got a bit of coaching and support themselves to understand it. I know in a lot of the communities here, as I'm listening to teachers and families talk about going back, and we're looking at all kinds of different models, as I'm sure you all have too. Some students will be on campus, it's parent choice here, and some will be at home doing remote learning. And teachers and families are really bonding together to form some small groups of 2 or 3 families that can get together, who are conducting themselves similarly in terms of being quarantined or isolated or using safety measures, and they feel relatively comfortable and confident in doing so. So they're coming together for story times, for group play, for a variety of different things, small outings, PE outdoors, getting that physical activity going and keeping kids busy. So teachers and parents are just really working and networking together in great ways. And I think that has to continue. As far as the outdoor classroom idea, that is so very exciting. For years and years and years, as I've worked with teachers, I have always told them, anything that you can teach indoors, you can teach outdoors. It's just a structure, that's all it is. Take it outside. And I think weather permitting and, those sorts of things, that's exactly what's going to happen, and that will help in this situation as well. Thank you for sharing that. It's very valid.
A quick question then, because what I'm feeling pretty centered with things, and then I start thinking about all the parameters. Mm-hmm. And I know there's curriculum for children. So is there, I know there are curriculums through, we use creative curriculum in the gold assessment, but I really feel like there needs to be parent caregiver education, maybe in a more formalized way. And that feels daunting, given that we're going back to school in a few weeks for workshops. And so that feels a little daunting to me. I've worked as a speech pathologist for years, done a lot of small, like one-on-one with parents, and still feel like we have a good parent relationships. But that was really hard in the spring to even get children to attend. We usually had about 40% of our kids. Mm-hmm. We still don't have internet access for a lot of people that's adequate. So
right.
That feels like a whole nother curriculum to me.
It is. And next week, we're doing the makeup session from the social and emotional learning that was to have been 2 weeks ago, and I was very ill. And in that session, I will be sharing a resource, a searchable database that my early childhood team at AIR put together. It's pretty comprehensive. There are about 189 different resources, primarily geared to working with families with early childhood grade students. I'm hoping that that will provide some support for what you're looking for. I will go through the database when we're done today to look specifically at how that list is curated. My understanding and my best memory, because that's a lot of resources that we went through, is that a lot of it had to do with help teachers providing information and providing ideas for learning activities and ways that parents can work with their students at home when they're homeschooling or trying to do distance learning with and without strong internet access. But I'll go back and look to see what the specific parent piece is, because that's a big deal. You're exactly right. And they don't know either. And this issue of having connectivity and resources is not just isolated in your area. We're hearing it all over, and there have been some creative ways that school districts have sought to help communities, and then we'll move on. But one thing I've seen that they have done is to equip school buses with what do you call them, modems and routers, and sending those school buses into areas where they have difficulty connecting and letting the buses be there for the length of the day so that families, students can log in using school issued laptops and iPads and such, so they can get some time with teachers. And that's just one idea. There have been other things that have happened. I know that some of the cell phone service companies have stepped up to try to help and so on, but we're going to have to continue to be creative, right? And that's what we do. I think that early childhood lends itself to that maybe much more than other grades that might feel more confined. So again, we're going to step through these different topics on our roadmap as we go through the rest of our time together today. But I do want to take just a minute to ground us a little bit, because whether we're in person or we're online, the learning environment, the classroom environment that we set is going to be really key. And this includes, it seems like a no-brainer. It seems like we know this about our classrooms when we're in there, and we know what a sound early childhood classroom looks like, with materials that are appropriate for students' use based on their skills and abilities and their age. We know how to use furniture appropriately and so on, but this is a different topic when we're talking about an appropriate online learning environment. So there have been a number of things that teachers are doing. I've seen teachers who have outfitted their home offices to look like classrooms, so that what students are seeing behind them is reminiscent of what they would see in a classroom. And they would even stand to use a whiteboard or a calendar or set, props for story time and things like that, so that it feels very much like students are seeing and experiencing what they might be able to do in a classroom. But it also involves setting time schedules and transition times, and doing activities that transition, that get children up out of their seats and moving for just a minute or two between topics, or transitioning between story time and maybe a lesson or a discussion that you want to have with them. So the environment continues to be critically important, whether we're with them or we're not in person. And this is an area too where I think that we have a good amount of influence in helping families to set expectations with their children at home around school time. When you're in school, you need to be attentive. We're not touring your bedroom and sharing your favorite toys with your friends online and things like that. We're focused that families have a dedicated place and space for students to be online with their teachers, and that space is really, and space and time are honored, that there are minimum distractions and other things going on, that there aren't other kids in the household who are vying for the laptop or the iPad or whatever it is that they're using. So really getting on the same page with families about what does online learning time need to look like and feel like to the extent possible, and understanding, of course, that we have zero control over what actually happens. But the more we can do to set those expectations and be clear, the better off I think we'll be, and it will help students to really understand that this is an important learning time.
Hi, Janice. This is Kate.
Yeah.
I'm with RSU1 in Bath and Bath and Phippsburg and Woolwich. And I did sessions with parents, just parents. So that was very successful, Mary Beth, that I actually just spoke to parents directly about how the schedule would work, what we'd be doing during the sessions, and that kind of eased some of what was happening. And all the way through it, I just kept reassuring them that whatever you can do will be fine. It doesn't, you know, like we're used to kids laying on the floor for a session and not participating until they're ready. Like, that's okay. Just keep connected, and he'll hopefully, or she'll hopefully come back to the meeting, or I'll be able to go, hey, I know this is about dinosaurs and blah, 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 you know, like, but some of that worked because I had already established relationships with students in the spring. And now I think the apprehension for all of us is that we don't have those relationships yet. So I've asked my teachers off the books to start engaging with parents and sending a video and saying hello that way, like not active Zoom, but at least, you know, not, you know what I mean, but at least so that they knew their face and kids can see who we are. We've read a story to them, you know, they have a little bit of resource. I think that kind of sets the stage for, like, we don't know how it's all going to happen. And, you know, hopefully you all have a website. I did develop a website, which I had one, but I wasn't really working at it. But now I work at it harder, having things available on my website, like stories they can go back to and find, and you know, resource lists and things like that. So, you know, some of that environment also like takes some extra work, which we're all used to in pre-K. So I just wanted to say that I think that's our apprehension, Mary Beth. Maybe that's because we don't have those relationships yet with those families, and that's some of what's going on with us, because we strive for that, and when it just seems so unknowable to what's going to happen, that just makes it harder. But I don't know. Does that touch base with anybody else, or what you're talking about? Or
Yeah, anyway. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. All right, so we'll get right into this idea of clarifying our non-negotiables. That's sort of the first step on our way here. And these non-negotiables are the things that are absolutely essential that students need to be exposed to learn, and to understand. And these are not made up concepts by any stretch. These are backed by good research, promising practices in early childhood education. These non-negotiables are the essence of the discipline, and they're all of the threads that bind us from our pre-K learning standards up to our kindergarten learning standards at first grade. It's that vertical alignment that we need to be very cognizant of as we plan for and think about what are the things that I need to keep at front and center. And just as the picture indicates, those rocks that are stacked and they're fitting so nicely together and not toppling over, the way that we identify these non-negotiables is by having a strong understanding of what our early childhood learning standards or learning guidelines are, understanding what the next grade level, whether it's kindergarten or first grade if you're a kindergarten teacher, but really understanding that vertical alignment. And where do I, as a pre-K teacher, begin, and where does colleague, as the kindergarten teacher, begin and take over, so that we can stay that course to the best of our ability again. And that doesn't mean that we don't accommodate children that are struggling, or children that are excelling. We absolutely do, but we're doing this in a very intentional, purposeful, and planful way as we move through the beginning of the school year and thinking about how in the world do I get all of this done? Because it can be very daunting. And so one of the ways that I'd like to encourage you to think about this is to really get into your early learning standards, or your grade level standards even, and really look at what are the skills and abilities in these are the four content areas. We know that there's social and emotional, there's other things that are swirling around that we also have to pay attention to. But just to sort of make the job manageable, taking just a minute to really look at those standards and pull out those specific nuggets, because just looking at a set of standards can feel very daunting. Look at a set of standards in our current climate with all of our concerns and our unknowns and all of this, it can make quite dizzy, right? It's a lot. And then we're adding in this whole home-based piece. What can families do? How can I support families? How do I stay in touch with them? All of that. So I'm encouraging you to whittle it down as best you can, get very specific so that you can take this in manageable chunks. And maybe think about doing this as a team approach, so that you're not looking at all four of these disciplines or content areas, but maybe you've got colleagues within this group or others who would be willing to break it up with you and do a little bit at a time, come back together for that really good PLC kind of convening and working together and partnership. Because I promise you, going through this with others who are like-minded and like-concerned about the same issues is so much easier than trying to tackle all of this all by yourself. It's a lot, and we know that. And so as you start breaking down those non-negotiables and really figuring out, these are my teaching targets. These are the things I have to do. I need to at least, make sure that children have strong exposure and strong, opportunities to learn. Figure out where there's overlap, because in the overlap is where the job gets a little bit easier. If we can teach 1, 2, or 3 concepts in a single activity or session, or a few coordinated activities, that's part of, that's easier than trying to do it all in isolation. And I realize too that there's not anything that we're going to talk about today that you haven't already heard in traditional, non-COVID teaching scenarios, but it's really about just trying to bring us back to center, because we haven't been in center for a long time now. It's been so much uncertainty, so much going on. So teaming up, figuring out those non-negotiables, figuring out the overlap, and doing it in a way that you can be collaborative with your colleague, either horizontally working with the same level, and vertically if you're in a small school where maybe you're the only classroom but there's a teacher. That's a good opportunity as well to support and look for overlap. Okay. The next stop on our roadmap is to identify prior learning needs, and what knowledge and skills are going to be needed, and what did students learn prior to coming into your classroom this school year. To me, this feels like one of the most difficult things to try to identify right now in this point in time, and we'll kind of talk through that just a little bit. So, what do students need to know to be able to be prepared to learn in your classroom? What are the key concepts that are required that are going to be able to help that learner really engage in learning activities and expectations for this new school year? And what key skills are going to be required for them to be able to be successful and feel good and feel like they're really connected both with you and with their peers. This feels hard to me. I'd love to hear from you all, but this is a time when we haven't had the benefit of classroom visits from, students moving from one grade level to another, or students visiting from the community who maybe were in community-based Head Start programs or child care centers or other types of early childhood centers coming to visit your pre-K classroom and really thinking about what is next year going to look like. What concerns do you have around identifying prior learning needs and really understanding where children are coming in with their ability to assimilate into the learning environment? Anyone want to share?
Well, Janice, we're not really sure how we're going to do assessments. I mean, we've been told several different things, so hopefully when we get some guidance about that. We traditionally do a dial screening, which looks for developmental delays, which gives you an insight into students. But now I have kits that I'm going to have to revamp, and because not everybody can touch everything and nobody can be in the same space. And I mean, you have all of those COVID type restrictions. So there's some things that we're going to be able to do, but we had parents fill out parent surveys. So that kind of gave me a heads up in a way, gave me a little bit of a picture of students that I haven't seen yet. And then I hope to be able to speak to each student individually through a Zoom or something before school starts to give me some idea. But it's going to be really tricky. It's going to be really hard. I think it's going to take a long time before we have that kind of information. A lot longer than we're used to. It's going to be hard.
I think you're exactly right about that. And I think that a couple of things that teachers are doing right now, and sending introduction videos, for example, is one of the ideas that was already shared. But also within those introduction videos, really also encouraging parents to get their students on a schedule 2 weeks before school starts, at least a week before school starts, so that they're going to bed at a reasonable time, that they're getting up on a routine, that they are dialed in the mindset and the headspace and thinking about school and what does that look like. I know that some teachers are doing home visits where they're meeting in an open air space with 2 or 3 students and their families to try to do some of these assessments and some of these welcoming, get to know you sorts of activities in a safe way. This is all time consuming. This is all, and some are doing it as part of their teaching contract and some are not. So again, it's very difficult to say you can do this, this, and this because I don't know your parameters for your particular situation. But these are some things that are being done in addition to pulling small groups of 2 or 3 students and their families together on quick meetings that are, 20 to 30 minutes max, 20 minutes usually, to hit the highlights, to introduce, to see each other's faces, to then help 2 or 3 or 4 students see one another outside of the big picture frame that is, the Brady box, Brady family, picture, of everybody on the screen. So it helps those students to at least feel connected to one another, and they'll see one another if you do any whole group activities online. It's like, oh yeah, I know you, those sorts of things, and easing people back into this. I can't stress it enough. We are going to be thinking outside of the box. I think that early childhood teachers are the perfect group to be able to think outside the box and to do things a little bit differently. But we will learn a lot as we go, won't we? It's a lot to take in. So I've mentioned this before, but really, really, really understanding what within your early learning standards are the most important points. What were students expected to know at the end of the previous school year? How do we know this? Do we have any reference points that we can look at from prior teachers rather, who had our students? This is an opportunity if children are coming into pre-K and perhaps they were in another center in the community, it would be great if there's an opportunity for you to ask the parents to be in touch with that teacher. And if there is anything at all, any sort of learning inventories that they may have collected data on those students, to please share them with you. At this point, we're really in a place where every small piece of data that we can collect on our students is something more than we have right now today, which is not a lot. So I'm strongly encouraging teachers to reach out in these ways and to really be talking with one another, going up grades, going down grades, and really trying to know these students as best they can. Parents are a great source as well for helping us to understand what students know how to do and what they've mastered. And they can demonstrate that with artifacts that they have collected, writing samples, drawing samples, video clips, recorded discussions and conversations, all of these sorts of things. And so to sort of get at this, we can ask a series of questions of ourselves, of families, and our colleagues, and for those in the community who may have knowledge of the children who are coming to us. So, really understanding what knowledge students need to be able to demonstrate. Also, what understandings will they need to master? So there are skills and there are understandings that we want them to have. And then there's a set that they need to master these foundational skills in order to go into the next grade level, ready for higher English language arts activities and lessons and learning, mathematics, and so on. So try hard to get straight on the things that are essential. And a lot of this year, I believe, is going to be centered around children's social and emotional well-being, because we know if they're not grounded socially and emotionally, they're going to have a hard time picking up those concrete skills that we talk about in our learning standards, right? In our content areas, at least. And then, as I mentioned, next week when we talk about social and emotional learning, we'll try to dig in a little bit more on, how do we know in this unusual learning environment? How do we know? Lots of questions to be asked. Identifying resources is critical along our roadmap, through our professional development and so on, and get back into some of that, the good stuff, the good nuggets of information and processes that help us to be organized through our planning and our teaching, and pull from those things. And I know all of us have a ton of things that we've collected over the years. I know too that I would save my lesson plans from year to year, and on the back side of each week, I would keep notes of what worked well and what needed to be tweaked, or how I could extend a lesson, and so on. Perhaps now is a good time to pull them out and think about them in a different way. How can I do this under my current circumstance in my classroom? How would I achieve this same lesson if I have to teach it online? And really just thinking very compartmentally about how do we do this? It's a lot. And then, paying close attention to the resources that come out around working in a pandemic, around being safe, around being, in this unique COVID-19 environment. I'm going to share a good amount of that with you next week, but it's overwhelming. You will need to be adept at sorting and picking and choosing the things that speak to your need, your level of support that you're looking for. Please don't try to read everything that people give you. I know that there's this feeling that we need to do all of that, and we need to have good knowledge and working understanding of what's going on around us. But we also got to get very clear if we're going to trudge through this. And some of these resources that we receive on a daily basis could be divided amongst colleagues. Can you please read this when we come back together at our next weekly meeting? Can you synthesize what you read? I'll do the same, and so on, so that we can, again, divide and conquer. I've put together creating pre-assessments and conducting and analyzing the results, because I think you have to kind of do this all as a set of skills and tasks even. So that's why they're put together the way they are. Pre-assessment strategies are going to be very different, as has already been pointed out. We're really going to have to think creatively about how do we know what students know, and what are the ways of knowing that students have mastered a skill, they've almost mastered it, or they haven't mastered it at all. And I know some teachers are very concerned about gathering information from families, especially if they feel like it's going to be always rosy and always glowing. My child can do everything, and more. We're used to being able to see students in their environment, right? And we're collecting data all the time through our classroom observations, through the formal assessments that we use, and so on. So yet again, like everything else, we are thinking outside the box and really trying to figure out how do we connect one-on-one with these students to really know what do they know. Some teachers are trying to do some of these face-to-face kinds of activities online. I'm curious to see how, if that works. Some are observing children's playtimes with siblings or with the neighbors or trusted people that, again, as I mentioned before, who are taking similar precautions and families feel comfortable. They're asking parents to videotape those so that they can at least see how students are talking, listen to their conversations, those types of things. But yet again, we are still in this space that's quite different than before. And when you have data, whether it's artifacts that you've collected on your own or they're artifacts that you've collected from families, sitting down and really thinking about what can I learn from what I've got? How is the student's understanding and knowledge in comparison to their peers? And this is going to be very different than years past too, because we don't have everybody in a like learning environment. And we probably won't even have them in a like learning environment where everybody is exposed to the same exact treatment, learning, and so on. And so it could be difficult to do peer-to-peer comparisons just to get baselines and to really understand that. So then it becomes even more important, I think, to try to connect one-on-one with students and have that trusting relationship where they feel good demonstrating their knowledge and skills to you. If you're fortunate enough to have students back in the classroom all together, it's still going to look different. We're still not going to see the little social groupings that go on through free play and things like that we would typically see. But we're all going to continue to try, right? I'm realizing we are at the top of the hour. Nicole and Marcy, what's our time schedule? Shall we wrap?
It's up to you, Janice. I understand if folks need to go, that's fine. Like I said, I am recording it, so if you have to leave and we continue, no big deal. I have the Zoom room available until 11:30 at the latest.
Okay, let me go do a quick check over here. I can't get my calendar to open. Oh my goodness. I think I'm fine though. Okay, so that's what we'll do. We completely understand if you do need to jump off. Just as we've done in our classrooms forever and ever, we're looking to create learning experiences that are applicable for all of our students, that are supportive, that are responsive, all of those types of things. And the way that we do that is by really trying to identify the ways that students learn best and capitalizing on those. And this year, we may find, for those of you who can do the outdoor classrooms, you may find that that's the place where students feel the most free and open and willing to really show you what they know. and what they can do. Because if they have been, listening to adult conversation, hearing the news, sensing the fear that and uncertainty that's going around, it may be challenging for them to really open up in a classroom environment that's contained, where they may feel like, I just don't know if I feel okay being in here. That kind of fear, and we've experienced that. I would go out on a limb to say that we've had those conversations and thoughts ourselves. So maybe thinking about, where can I teach this lesson where students are going to feel most likely to engage? And then understanding and identifying which concepts and skills are commonly unknown, and then grouping children together in learning environments that work for small groups, whether that's online or in the park, in the playground area, within our classrooms to the best of our ability. This is our small grouping that we've always done, but now it takes on the added level of not only the small groups of children who need to practice the same skills, but need to practice the same skills and have the same level of confidence and environment that is helping them to feel okay about learning, and so on. And so it continues to be about really giving children choices as best we possibly can, giving them the space to grow and explore and be confident in what they're doing. I have heard of teachers who have felt pretty good about being able to get children into online learning environments in small groups and helping them to, after the initial excitement of being online and seeing their friends and their teacher and so on, but have been really capable of making those online small groups successful by telling children the expectations, having families set those expectations, keeping the lessons targeted, keeping the activities flowing, and having stand-up, sit-down movement times in between, and so on. So it's all of the same concepts that we've been doing within our classrooms. Now we're thinking outside that box yet again to do it in creative ways. So some next steps, some things to think about. Take it one step at a time. This is big, it's different, it's intimidating in a lot of ways. So be kind to yourself and take it one step at a time. Collaborate for sanity. Anything that you can break down and share the load, please do. Your colleagues are feeling the same way. They're having the same thoughts, the same anxieties, and they have the same goals as you. And continue to reflect and learn as you go. Be willing to try the things that feel hard or different or uncertain, because if you're feeling it, others are too, I'm sure. And then I wanted to take a moment to pause to see, are there questions either for Marcy and Nicole, or for me, or for one another even? There is a question in the box. How much time do others feel pre-K students can handle with online learning? Yeah, 20 to 30 minutes is probably about right. Anything else anyone wants to bring up and share? All right. Well, I want to thank you again for being here this morning. I know you have other things that you could be doing, but I'm glad you chose to be here. Your training number, or QR code rather, is here. And like I said, next week we'll be talking about social emotional learning and sharing some a large resource database with you. We'll talk through that and how to use it. And anyway, be well. I'll see you then. I'll take care. Bye.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome. I need to look at the, there are a lot of great comments. I couldn't read because they were long. I wanted to look at what people are talking about.
I just ordered these 2 books right here from. You see
Messy
it?
Math. Oh yeah. Where
And then-
did you order them online from?
Yeah,
Where?
Amazon. And then this one.
Yes.
Yes.
There are a couple of early